And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. It's 7:30 here on the West Coast, 10:30 there in Baltimore. We're going to continue with this story. It is quite the achievement now that the MV Dali, nearly 2 months since it collided with the Francis Scott Key Bridge, causing the bridge to collapse. Well, it was refloated off the crash site today, early this morning at high tide. Fox's Rebecca Castor has more from Washington. Let's watch.
Monday morning, tugboats pulled the cargo ship that took down Baltimore's Key Bridge back to port, a major milestone in a months-long, complicated cleanup process.
These guys are doing an outstanding job. You know, it's going faster than I thought it would go.
The ship was finally able to move after controlled explosions broke up massive pieces of debris stuck on the boat's bow. And crews are a massive step closer to fully clearing the shipping channel to the port of Baltimore.
Despite the fact that people said this could take 6 and 9 months, I'm proud that we're on track, that by the end of May we'll have that federal channel reopened.
Dive teams have also recovered the bodies of all 6 construction workers killed in the collapse. Meanwhile, multiple agencies, including the FBI and U.S. Coast Guard, are still investigating what caused the collision. Preliminary findings from the National Transportation Safety Board show the ship had 2 electrical blackouts hours before leaving port.
The ship had an emergency generator. It does not power propulsion, and without the propeller turning, the rudder was less effective. They were essentially drifting.
The ship's 21 crew members from India and Sri Lanka have remained on board since the collision. With the boat now docked, it's still unclear when they'll be permitted to leave. So far, the White House has earmarked $60 million to rebuild the bridge and urged Congress to pass additional funding. But some House Republicans have appeared hesitant to do so. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Rebecca, thanks so much. What we want to do right now is bring into the conversation someone who has guided us through this story from the very beginning, March the 27th, the day after the bridge collapsed and the MV Dali collided with it. That's, of course, global shipping analyst and expert Sal Mercogliano. He joins me. Sal, good to see you yet again. You know, this story is still a story only because it's, yes, we were talking offline, moving along quite rapidly, that they got this done within 2 months' time here. What did it take, Sal?
Well, it took a concentrated effort on the part of many parts. We're looking at the Coast Guard, the Army Corps of Engineers. You're talking about salvage experts. So there was a lot of moving parts that had to get done here. I mean, the very least had to be done was really stabilize the vessel, get in there, make sure that the situation wasn't going to get any worse. And then they began a very systematic process of removing the bridge sections that were in the navigable channel. Once they were able to clear part of that bridge out, they were able to move vessels that were stuck in the port of Baltimore, get a little bit of cargo flowing in and out of the port, and then began this effort to refloat the Dali. Remember, the bow of the ship was actually aground up against the pier where it had taken out the bridge, and then bring the ship very methodically and very carefully back to Seagirt Terminal, basically right back to where it started from almost 2 months ago now.
Yeah, we're watching some video from earlier this morning of, I think that term is kind of funny, refloat. It seems like a kind of industry lingo, so to speak. You know, they were just moving it off the crash site, and the crew is still on. Obviously, all that cargo is still on the ship as well. Sal, what happens to it?
So, well, one of the things we expect to see happen, obviously, is they're going to be working on the bow section, removing that roadway section that's still there. But I would envision we'll start seeing container operations to remove the containers from the vessel. The ship has suffered severe damage up forward. The more we got a visualization of the ship, the more we saw that damage. So we can expect to start seeing container operations. Remember, they removed the ship to a terminal that didn't have really any container crane operators there today because the port wasn't in any sort of operations. So they'll start moving the containers off the ship so they can be transported to their original destinations over in Asia. And then I would envision that unless the crew is going to be held by the NTSB or the Coast Guard, they'll begin the process of probably doing a crew change. There'll have to be some determination of where the ship will go for repairing, either down to Norfolk or if it's capable of sailing overseas to an overseas shipyard.
Oh, wow. You know, we showed our viewers last week the controlled demolition, on the bow itself there, and maybe you saw some of that video in Rebecca Castor's report. How crucial was that to what happened today to get the refloating underway?
Yeah, they had to remove that section of the ship, and obviously because that was in one entire section, it was much too difficult to do individual cuts on that. They could have done it, but that would have taken a lot of time and actually exposed some of those crews working on the bridge to some risk. So they decided to take what was really the best course of action here, was to cut the bridge with explosive demolition, and then they could go in, slice what's left of the bridge off, and now what they'll do is go between those two piers, the two big pillars that held the bridge, finish clearing out what's left of the bridge. And as was noted, the commercial channel, the navigable channel, will be open fairly soon and allow vessels up to the full draft of 50 feet in.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, this is right on schedule what Maryland officials, including and led by Governor Moore, had said. They wanted it partially clear and reopened by the end of April, and they wanted it more fully clear by the end of May. So will it be completely navigable at the end of the month, or no?
They will be able to get ships in. They'll still probably be doing the limited passages through with tug escorts and slow speeds going through, because they still have sections of the bridge that are on the bottom that will have to be moved. So you won't see the channel open 24/7 per se. I think we're going to see some restrictions still in place, but this will allow Baltimore to return back to operations. We know that some of the major container liners have ships already scheduled to come in later this month at the beginning of June. And most importantly of all, we'll start seeing coal shipments start coming out. Those are the deepest draft vessels that come in and out of the Port of Baltimore. So this is really good news for the Port of Baltimore. I was very optimistic too at times.
Yeah.
You look at that schedule, it's like that's a really tough schedule, but they've been able to stay to it.
Yeah. Sal, lastly, while we have you, we got the preliminary report last week from the NTSB. Let's just go over some highlights. You heard from some of them in Rebecca Castor's report. But the Dali lost power hours before it even floated, before it even left port.
Yeah, and so that raises the question about really, and something that wasn't in the report, was really what was the state of the crew on board? How long had the engineers been on board? You get that image of the ship losing power, and you read through it, it was a mechanical issue, but it also maybe give you some indication of crew fatigue and some issues. I'd be much more interested in some long-term, what was the issues on board this ship beyond just the days before? Were they having systematic problems throughout the vessel? And the NTSB was just a preliminary report. We got a good little handle on what happened leading up to the hit on the bridge, but what we didn't get was really a cause for the power outage. We didn't get a lot of detail about some imagery we saw, for example, the smoke coming out of the vessel, why the vessel took the turn it did toward the bridge. So we got some answers, but there's still a lot of questions, and this is why it was just a preliminary report by the NTSB.
Right, so you're saying, the power outage, that's just one answer. That's just the beginning to a whole host of answers here, because obviously if there's no power, there's no propulsion, and that seemed to be kind of the thrust of the report itself, the preliminary one.
Yeah, I didn't get any indication from the report. Was it a mechanical issue? Were we having breakers trip? Was there a transformer issue? Okay. Or was there some crew issues involved in here? And again, we got the mechanics, the timeline, the tick-tock of what exactly happened, but not a lot of in-depth explanation about what was the underlying causes for those incidents to take place. All
right, Sal Mercogliano, as always, thanks so much for helping us make sense of this story. I know I speak for the viewers. There's a lot of interest in this story still. What do you have your eye on in this story?
I'm really going to be interested to see, again, obviously the final report. We're going to be hearing investigations very soon about this. I'm really interested to see how the Port of Baltimore springs back from this, where we're going to see a resumption back to full trade about this. And then I'm also interested in the long-term impact, not just in the Port of Baltimore, but other ports around the United States. Okay. Are we going to take some lessons out of this event and really look at our maritime infrastructure? This is more than just, the Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers and local Department of Transportations. We really need to holistically look at all the ports throughout the United States and decide whether or not our infrastructure is in place to sustain vessels the size of Dali and bigger.
Yeah, and of course, everything we have been talking about, we have not even mentioned bridge reconstruction, and it seems like that part of this story is very far down the road.
It is, but I mean, you're going to start seeing it very quickly. You know, one of the things we've done is actually change some infrastructure in some ports to accommodate larger bridges. The Bayonne Bridge, probably one of the most famous, where they actually lifted the bridge while it was still in service. Here, you're going to see a big restructuring in the Port of Baltimore. But again, I'm looking at other ports around the world. You know, in San Diego, the Coronado Bridge, huge, massive structure, half of the American Pacific fleet's on one side of that bridge. Is that bridge safe for operations, or could we have an incident like this happen again? I think one of the things that you and I have found out is it only takes a small disruption in the global supply chain to cause havoc throughout the entire world system.
Yeah, that's so true. Sal, as always, thanks so much. We'll talk soon, my friend.